Hello.
Hi, Bianca.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. It's always lovely to see your wonderful faces.
Oh, right back at you.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, we are so happy to be here today with Bianca Marais, who is the author of Hum, If You Don't Know the Words, she was our guest on episode 65 to talk about that book, which was our 9th read along. And since then, she's also published another fantastic novel, If You Want to Make God Laugh. Bianca's here today to talk with us about her new short story that is an Audible original, and also a bit about her podcast that she has started since we spoke last time. Welcome back, Bianca.
Thank you so much for having me. Always wonderful to chat to the two of you.
So we wanted to start off by talking about the Prin Viper, which is your new Audible original short story. Chris and I were talking before we started chatting with you about this is going to be tricky to talk about because it's definitely, there's high possibility for spoilers. So we thought maybe you'd be well practiced now at how to talk about what the story is about without giving too much away.
You would think that, but you would be wrong. Here's the thing about an Audible original is that people don't tend to reach out and ask you to chat to their book clubs about it, or you don't, you obviously don't do bookstore events or anything. So this is the first time that I'm publicly speaking about the story. I have been muttering darkly at some of the reviews that I've seen and the things some people have said. And I've been like, damn it, you missed the whole damn point of it. What is wrong with people? Why don't you have critical thinking skills? But this is the first time I'm speaking about it. So just to give the listeners an understanding of the premise, it is a dystopian world in the future where once a woman gets pregnant, she goes on trial to defend the right to have her child. But in a twist, there are 13 jurors. Now, in most jury systems, the jurors are meant to be completely impartial. But in this jury system, the jurors are all completely partial because what happens in this world is that there's software called quasi-coso, quantum science computational software that at this point in time is able to map out each person's life in complete detail. So who that child will go on to be, who their friends will be, who they'll get married to, the careers that they will follow, etc., etc. The software maps it out to the degree that they are able to say who will be detrimentally affected if this child is born and who will be positively affected if this child is born. So the woman goes on trial, the jurors listen to quasi-coso's projections, and based on that, the jury then reaches a verdict as to whether the child can be born or not.
Wow, that's a great summation. Thank you for that. And we're honored that we're the first to be talking with you about this story because we both loved it. And we were blown away by so many of the literary allusions in the story to classic stories. Like I think The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Hester Prynne is the main character there. And, a lot of other stories that came up along the way as well. And I wondered, how did you go about writing this story or conceptualizing this story? Did you have some of these, classics in mind, or were you going more from the artificial intelligence issue and crises that we're facing today, like global warming?
Yeah, it was the weirdest way this story came to me because, as you both know, I do not write dystopian fiction, I don't write sci-fi, and I don't write short stories. And there's a good reason for that because I'm extremely wordy. There's nothing that can be said in a tiny sentence that I won't speak about for days and days. So I was listening to my husband having a conversation with the staff member because this was during the beginning of COVID and he was home. And this woman was struggling very much to have a child. She'd gone for various in vitros and she was really upset that particular day. And, if you know my husband, he's not someone who's very good at giving emotional support to someone. He's the class clown. He's the guy who always tries to make jokes and lighten the mood and try and make people laugh. And even you could just see he was at a loss as to how to console her. And something he said really triggered it for me because, I know so many women who have got to go for fertility treatment to have babies. And many of them, the fertility treatment doesn't work and it's just soul destroying. And it often gets me thinking, it's so unfair, this random way that the universe decides, and other people will say it's God or whatever, that, something gets to decide who has children, who doesn't. And, I worked for 10 years in South Africa with a charity or a nonprofit organization that looked after abused, abandoned, and HIV positive children. So back then it was always on my mind that some people could easily have children, but they shouldn't have been allowed to have children. And then there are people who desperately want children and can't have them. So it really got the wheels spinning in terms of this, who gets to decide who has children and who doesn't. And suddenly this idea just clicked into place. This concept occurred to me. And then, of course, I haven't written in the genre, so I had to do kind of research on the genre and on this future that I envisioned. And as I was writing, I was just trying to think of character names. And I was going, if we were in this future where, books are no longer a thing, but people are always nostalgic for the past, cars are no longer a thing. I think one of the lawyers is called Buick Washington. Because his parents and whoever would have been nostalgic for a time when they owned a Buick, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, being a writer, I love any kind of literary allusions. So I named a whole bunch of characters after, writers, et cetera, or characters in books. And certainly Hester Prynne came to mind, because women's behavior, women's decisions, women's bodies, we've been judged for a very long time. Our bodies have been controlled, et cetera, et cetera. So she was front of mind when I wrote this. And so that's why I chose the last name for my main character, Naomi.
Because this short story I thought was incredible. The pace was really quick. Longtime listeners know I love myself a courtroom drama, and this is purely courtroom drama. And I thought it was really brilliant how you placed it so far in the future. It really was. You could bring up so many different things that we're not familiar with. And I was wondering how much of that was done via research and how much was it you just gave yourself permission to just, let your mind go wild?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. It's everything that I've written in the past has been greatly mired in reality. So I've written about apartheid South Africa, and each time I had to do a lot of research about that era that I was writing in. So how many of you don't know the words? That was 1976. And if you want to make God laugh, was like 1994 to 1996. So I had to make sure that everything there was factually correct, that the backdrop was faithfully represented, that nothing there was incorrect. And suddenly I had the story whereby, it was in the future and I could just play around with it. And a lot of things, I did research certain things. I'd get an idea about using tattoos to help regulate body temperature, things that are solar powered, etc., using nail varnish that helps act as, when you hop on the subway, you just flash your nail varnish. Or when you pay at a store, instead of pulling out your credit card, your nail varnish gives all the information that these machines need. And then I was like, holy heck, that could lead to identity theft where people chop off people's fingers to use their nail varnish. And then how would they work around that? So definitely my writer's brain was having a lot of fun with, how do I see this world looking? If we no longer have natural resources like trees and natural fibers, etc., if everything's made out of plastic, or how will things be used in the future? Will they be printing things using 3D printers? So I'm sure that there's real diehard sci-fi fans who will listen to the story and be like, oh, this is terrible, she got everything wrong, etc., etc. But the whole story takes place within this day, as the courtroom drama unfolds. And so all of that information just had to flesh out the story, because the entire jury is sitting there, they're listening to Quasicosa. They're listening to everything. So what I wrote about the clothes and the nail varnish and the tattoos and things were just like little observational things. But certainly this is a story that I think could be greatly expanded into a novel. And, you know, if I ever do get that chance, then it's something that I would have to put a lot more research into as I really think about this world.
Yeah. And, you know, the story was really twisty and turny. So I can only imagine. I wonder if some of those reviewers didn't finish the whole story, because to me, it's really obvious that you were none of those things that you mentioned that some of the reviewers said. But that's what I liked about the story, was just when I thought I knew kind of what was going on, because in the beginning, you don't really know what's going on. You know, I would start to kind of get my pacing, and then something would happen and I'd be like, oh, wow, okay, this is a different thing completely than what I thought it was. That happened a couple times, and I really enjoyed the story so much for that. But then you also, you know, you're known for having wonderful, heartfelt humor in your stories. And I thought there was some humor in this one as well, even though it's kind of dystopian.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, there's some fart jokes, man. I channeled my inner 10-year-old boy and had some fart jokes, you know, because anything, you know, I hate writing that gets classified as kind of trauma porn, you know, trauma for the sake of trauma and just compounded hardship on top of hardship. Because life is not like that. Even in the worst moments, even in the most bleak moments, our coping mechanism as human beings is humor. You know, that's how we deal with things. And so that's something I always try and incorporate into my books. In fact, the next book that I've written is, again, a complete genre change for me. It's contemporary fantasy. It has 6 witches who are in their 80s, who are bringing down the patriarchy, having the best sex of their lives. They run a distillery. It's just wild. And that book is the one book that I've really completely and utterly leaned into the humor writing that I love doing. But certainly, even in this dark dystopian kind of tale, there were a few moments of levity. And I was very lucky in that Audible allowed me to listen to everybody who was auditioning for each role, and I had it very clearly in my mind how each character should sound. I think the auditioning for Matthias was the hardest, because he's 100 and something years old, Latinx person, and so, you know, that was kind of difficult to get that voice right. But I think his performance was excellent. I think the whole cast of performers was really excellent. And then I wanted kind of like a radio play quality to it, you know, with the sound of the gavel and the murmurs in the gallery and things like that. And I asked if I could do that, and they said absolutely. So it was really wonderful to really bring it alive that way.
Yeah, so that was one of our questions. Did you know who the cast was as you were writing it? Is that what you were saying? I mean, you knew that this was going to be Audible only, right? So how did it change your writing process in general?